Maseches Yevamos Daf Yud Vez discusses three sugyas. First one is that of tzaras mima'enes, second is tzaras eilinus, and the third is leaving Hilchos Yibum altogether and going to the concept of contraception. Now we begin about a third of the way through the first Amud. We've already learned that part, the first third, in the previous sugya, and we start with tzaras mima'enes. Now a mima'enes is when a child, that is a girl who's less than 12 years old, is married to someone by her mother or her brother. That is only a marriage d'Rabbanan, and she has the right to walk out of that marriage at any time she wants. Now, had she been married by her father, it would have been a marriage d'Oraisa, and she would require a get in order to get out of that. However, if her father no longer has rights with her, he cannot marry her off. The mother or brother can do a d'Rabbanan, but she can walk out and cancel the marriage whenever she wants to. Now, why would the father not have rights with her anymore? So one reason might be because he died. Another reason would be because he already married her off to somebody else, and she got divorced from that person, in which case, even though the father's alive, he has no rights to marry her off any longer. If he did, he would be just like the mother and the brother, and she could walk out of that marriage whenever she wants. Now, the halacha of miyan is that it cancels the marriage completely, and she is not forbidden to anybody. So let's say she walks out of a marriage with someone, she can marry that person's brother, no problem. However, midrabanan we don't allow it. Midrabanan we view it as if she had a get. Now, midrabanan, we don't usually have a problem with it if she just walks out of a regular marriage. We have a problem with it when she walks out of a yibum situation. That is, she was married to Ruvain through a d'Rabbanan marriage. Ruvain died and she fell to yibum. Now she wants to walk out of that. That situation, it looks too similar to a real yibum where she did a chalitza and got out of that connection via a breaking of the yibum connection. In a case like that, we consider it d'Rabbanan as if she didn't cancel the original marriage, but she was released from the yibum through a chalitza or a divorce or something along those lines, and therefore we consider it to be still with a connection. Now, that applies to a regular girl who's mima'enes. Her tzara would have a problem as well if she was an erva. That is to say as follows. Let's say the girl who did miyan was an erva to the person she fell to yibum. So she was married to Shimon, and she was married to Ruvain, and she was the daughter of Shimon. So Shimon's daughter went and married his brother Ruvain through a d'Rabbanan marriage, just because Shimon didn't have rights in her anymore. And then she fell to yibum to Shimon. So she fell to Yibum to her father. Ruvain died and she fell to Yibum to her father. Now she walks out of that marriage. So she is now a case where she is an erva. She's a bitoi. She's the daughter of her yavam, and she's walking out of the marriage. It should cancel completely. What should be the halacha of her tzara? So her tzara should be a regular tzara. She's no longer a tzaras erva because the marriage was canceled. However, midrabanan, we say it looks as if it was considered a real marriage. And therefore, we don't view the miyan as if it canceled the yibum connection, and therefore we aser the tzara as a tzaras erva. The Rabbanon, she's considered to be a tzaras erva because we consider that marriage to still have existed and have been canceled. So, in the case of a tzaras bitoi mima'enes, that tzara, who is the tzara of a daughter who did miyan, or an erva who did miyan, we asked her that because of the same appearance of having been part of a real connected marriage that wasn't canceled. Now we go a step further, and even if she's not a tzaras erva, even if she's just a tzaras mima'enes, we ask her that as well. That is to say, a girl is married to Ruvain, she's not related to Shimon at all, she has another co-wife, the two of them fall to yibum to Shimon, Ruvain dies, they fall to yibum to Shimon. And now the original girl who was a ketana walks out. She does miyan. So now her tzara should be obligated as part of a regular yibum. There's no problem with her, but we call her a tzaras mima'enes, and we say she's also forbidden to do yibum to Shimon. And the reason is because we don't want to get confused. If she would have been a tzaras erva, she'd be usher. We want to therefore make sure that we do not have a situation where she'll matter herself. So we ask her all tzaras mima'enes. Right, now the Gemara goes into, this is an explanation that's given later in the Gemara in the entire sugya why it's aser. The Gemara goes into the halacha here first. So the Gemara quotes of Lili Bar Mamel, who says that a tzaras mima'enes is aser. As the Gemara will explain later, this is the reason. So the Gemara says, how could you tell me, right, Mar Ukva asks in the name of Shmuel, it's Rav Lili Bar Mamel who says the name of Mar Ukva, says in the name of Shmuel, tzaras mima'enes is aser. And the Gemara asks, she's aser to who? You can't tell me that she's also to other brothers that she didn't do mian with. I mean, say as follows: if the original girl who did mian, she walked out of one specific yavam, so she walked away from Shimon, and she said, "I'm canceling this marriage." She's leaving the connection to Shimon. But if there are other brothers, she didn't do a mian to those specifically. So is the tzara forbidden to those brothers? So Gemara says that can't be, because the original girl, the one who did mian, is not even forbidden to those brothers. She's allowed to be misyabeim to those brothers, or marry them if she wanted to, because she did a mian. We don't make exer on that case. So the question is, if she's allowed to go marry those brothers, her tzara is certainly allowed to marry those brothers. On that, there's no gzera. So Gemara says, no, the tzara is usher on Shimon himself. The miyana walked out of the connection to Shimon. The tzara is also usher to Shimon. The Gemara says, what should be the reason? If the miyana, the girl who did miyan, is allowed to marry the other brothers, so then the tzara should be allowed to marry the one that she did miyan from. They're both, in either case, one of the two parties is the one who was involved in the miyan, and the other one is not. Right? Where the mima enes who was involved in the miyan is allowed to marry the other brothers who were not involved in the miyan, so the tzara who was not involved in the miyan should also be allowed to marry the yavam who was involved in the miyan. So the Gemara explains that the reason that it's usher is because we are afraid of a situation of tzaras erva. Tzaras mima enes, who was a tzaras erva, where the miyana was an erva, and as we said, in that case, we make gzer d'Rabbanan and it's usher. So now the Gemara asks, is there really such a gzer d'Rabbanan? Why don't you say that the original marriage is cancelled? And the Gemara quotes a proof that the original marriage should be viewed as cancelled. The Gemara quotes a Mishnah that says that if you have any case of a tzaras erva, and the erva gets out of the marriage either by divorcing the original husband, or by doing mean on the original husband, or if the original husband dies with children, or if the erva herself dies, if any of these things happen, there is no longer any patur on the tzaras erva, because she's not a tzaras erva anymore. The erva is gone from this entire situation. So mian there is listed, and divorce is listed. Both of them are listed. So the Gemara says, when we say mian, who was she mimayin from? It can't be that she was mimayin from the original husband, because that's the same as being divorced from the original husband. Either way, she's removed from the original husband. So it must mean that she's divorced from she did mian, that is, from the yavam. And there we see that the tzaras ervas, the tzaras mima enes, the tzaras ervas permitted in that case. So Gemara says, no, that's not a problem. We're not talking about where she did mian from the yavam. She did mian from the yavam, we would consider the marriage to still exist in midrabanan. The case is talking about where she did mian from the original husband, and you're asking, why is that different than a divorce? It is different than a divorce. There's two different types of ways of severing the bond, and midrabanan, we don't view it as if the original marriage is cancelled, and therefore we list them both separately in that Mishnah. Because this concludes the discussion of tzaras mima enes. Now we go to tzaras ailenes. The sugya of tzaras ailenes is as follows. An ailenes is a woman who cannot give birth, and she has physical signs which show that she'll never be able to give birth. This is because of some masculine traits which she may have. Now, the Gemara is going to discuss what is the status of her tzara. She herself is certainly not obligated in the mitzvah of yibum, and she is therefore forbidden to do yibum. Question is, what is the status of her tzara? The Gemara is going to say that she's usher. The Gemara will change later and say that she's mutter, and the Gemara will sum up the halachas in all these cases. And before we do that, the Gemara is going to have a couple of questions which will narrow down what exactly is the reason that a tzaras ailenes, what is the reason that an ailenes is forbidden to do yibum, and what is the reason that her tzara would or would not be freed. So the Gemara first quotes a halacha that is said by Rav Asi. Rav Asi says that a tzaras ailenes is asur. Just like the ailenes can't do yibum, the tzaras ailenes is freed from yibum, and she doesn't have to do anything. And she's usher to do yibum. Now, what is the source that the tzaras ailenes is not in the mitzvah of yibum? So the Gemara explains, because the pasuk says, "V'hoya b'char sharteled," that after yibum is done, the first child to be born should be named after the brother, should be named after his mother's first husband who died, the brother who died. Therefore, there has to be a child that's able to be born, and if you have an ailenes, she definitely cannot have children. There is no mitzvah of yibum. It is cancelled. Now, why should that aser the tzara? That just means that she can't do yibum. What does it have to do with the tzara. So Rav Asi's claim is that the tzara is also freed because now that there's no mitzvah of yibum, the islandess is an eshes ach. She's a brother's wife where there's no situation of yibum, and therefore she's an erva. She's an eshes ach. Her tzara is a tzaras erva, and therefore she's also forbidden to do yibum. So now the Gemara says we have a kash on that because we have a brisa that says that there's a different case of an eshes ach where you have a tzara who's a tzaras eshes ach, and that is the only case of a tzaras eshes ach. There is no other tzaras eshes ach. So and that would imply that the case of tzaras islandess is not a tzaras eshes ach, and therefore not freed from yibum. So what's that case? So the Gemara quotes the brisa. It says if you have 3 men and they're married to 3 women who are unrelated to each other. Now, we don't need the third man to be married, so we could leave her out. But you have Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, who are married, and Reuven has a wife, Shimon has a wife. They're not related to each other. Now, Reuven dies, and Reuven's wife, instead of Shimon doing yibum to her, Shimon does something called maimer. Maimer is where he does kedushin to her. He marries her like a regular woman, not in the manner of yibum. So she is now in a mixed state here. She has a Zika connection still, because the Zika wasn't taken off. When Shimon did Kedushin to her, he did not do Yibam. That did not resolve the Zika connection that was created between this woman and Shimon because of the death of Reuven. And there is a connection, though. She is married to Shimon, so there is a connection between them two. Then Shimon goes ahead and he dies, and now this woman now falls to Yibam, to Levi, together with Shimon's second wife. And now the connection between the original wife of Reuven, she has 2 zikas to Levi. First of all, she has the zika that she was married to Reuven, which was never absolved because Shimon never did yibum or chalitza. And she also has a connection that she was married through Kiddushin to Shimon, and Shimon died, and now she falls even because of that to Levi. So Levi has 2 zikas to this woman. Now that's usher. You cannot do yibum in a case of 2 zikas. The Gemara learns it out from Psukim that it has to be that it's one brother that's causing her to fall to yibum, not 2 separate brothers causing her to fall to yibum. One of them dies. That causes yibum. You can't have 2 different brothers causing yibum to a third brother. Therefore, she is forbidden. Now, the Gemara explains that is only a derabanan. The Raisa, there's no problem there. The Raisa, the Maimer, is nothing. This is an asmachta. It's a support for an Issa derabanan that she cannot fall to yibum. Now over there, the Gemara says that the halacha of her tzara is that she is a tzaras eshes ach. She's a tzaras eshes ach. The woman who had 2 yibums on her can't do yibum, and therefore she is a eshes ach in a case where there's no yibum. The tzara is a tzaras eshes ach. And the Brisa there concludes and says this is the case of tzaras eshes ach that can't do yibum, and there's no other such case in the world. That means to say that an islandess is not such a case. So the tzaras islandess should be permitted. She's not a case of a tzaras islandess that's forbidden. She's not a case of a tzaras eshes ach that is forbidden. So Gemara says no. The islandess is excluded by this line. This is the case of tzaras eshes ach. That's to exclude the islandess, because the islandess is also forbidden, but for a different reason. And the Gemara explains. The Gemara says it means as follows. In the case of the 2 yibums, the case of the Maimer, the tzara there does have to do chalitza. She's not freed. She's not a real tzaras eshes ach. And the reason is because in midaraisa there's no 2 yibums. It's only midarabanan. So midarabanan she can't do yibum, and therefore she has to do chalitza. The case of the tzaras islandess, though, that's a real tzaras eshes ach, because she does not have to do yibum or chalitza. She's freed completely because the islandess is a regular eshes ach. That's what we meant when we said this is the case that she falls to yibum and she can't do it. She has to do chalitza because of eshes ach. That's referring to the fact that in the case of the Maimer, the tzara still has to do chalitza. Okay, now the Gemara is the second kasha, and that's a Rav Asi had paskin that the tzaras eshes ach does not require yibum or chalitza. The tzaras islandess, that is, who has the status of a tzaras eshes ach, does not require yibum or chalitza. The Gemara asks that we have a brisa that says that she is required to do chalitza. The brisa says that if you have any tzaras erva, and the erva dies or does miyan or gets divorced or is found to be an islandess, the tzara is mutter. She can do a regular yibum, chalitza, whatever she wants. Now, that is all telling me, the point of the Bryce is to tell me that the erva is out of this situation because her marriage to the original husband was dissolved. But along the way, we see that a tzaras islandess is not usher, because it says that if the original erva was found to be an islandess, so she's removed from the situation, the tzaras islandess is fine. So it's very nice she's not a tzaras erva anymore, but she should still be a tzaras islandess according to Ravasi is usher. So Gemara answers there's two types of tzaras islandess. There's a tzaras islandess where the original brother, when Reuven married the islandess, he never knew she was an islandess, and when she was found to be an islandess, that retroactively dissolves the marriage because it was a mistake. He would never have married her had she known she was an islandess. Therefore, the marriage is dissolved. She was never part of the marriage. Her tzara is not a tzaras islandess at all. The islandess was never married to Reuven. That's what this Bryce was talking about, and it's saying that she's freed from being a tzaras erva, and she's also freed from being a tzaras islandess. However, Rav Asi, who said that a tzaras islandess is permitted, tzaras islandess is forbidden as a tzaras eshesach, was talking about where the brother, when Reuven married the islandess, he knew she was an islandess, and he married her anyway, and there's no mekach, and that marriage is not dissolved by the fact that she's an islandess. Therefore, she's an eshesach, and the tzaras islandess is a tzaras eshesach, and she is therefore still considered to be a tzaras erva, and she's freed without having to do any yibum or chalitza. Okay, now the Gemara quotes Rava. Rava says that the halacha is not like Ravasi. Rava says the halacha is that a tzaras islandess is mutter, even if he knew that she was an islandess when he married her, and there's no mekach, and she's still a tzaras islandess, there's no isser. And the reason is because when the Torah says that an islandess does not have to do yibum, the Torah is saying that an islandess is not included in the entire discussion. An islandess is exempted from the entire parsha of yibum. The concept of tzaras erva is only when they're both falling to yibum. And one of them is an erva. So the tzaras erva, when they're both falling to yibum, is pater just like the erva is. But here, the islandess is not falling to yibum. She's removed from the entire yibum discussion. So even though she's an eshesach, she's not an eshesach who's falling to yibum, and therefore she's taken out of the entire conversation. The tzaras islandess then, therefore, is not a tzaras erva who's falling to yibum, and she is chayev in yibum or chalitza completely just like anyone else. Now, in order to say this, we have to go back to Abraisa, where it said that the islandess was found to be an islandess, then her tzara is still chayev. The term found implies that it's got to be that the brother, when Reuven married her, Reuven didn't know that she was an islandess, and therefore she's not included in the parsha because her entire marriage was canceled retroactively. That's an imprecise wording now, because the same would be true if Reuven had known she was an erva, Reuven had known she was an islandess. It would still, she would not fall to yibum, and her tzara would not be obligated, and her tzara would not have the status of a tzaras erva, tzaras eshesach, tzaras islandess. So we have to change that wording a little bit. It's not that she was found to be an islandess, it's that she was an islandess, whether she was originally known to be an islandess or later found to be an islandess. Either way, according to Rava's psak, the tzara would be fine. Now the Gemara quotes Rav Yochanan, who says halacha in three of the cases we've discussed up to now. So he says tzaras mima enes, which we discussed on this daf, tzaras islandess, which we just discussed, and tzaras machzor gushalsei, which we discussed on the last daf. All these three tzaras are mutter. Okay, the Gemara now goes to the halacha of contraception. Now, the type of contraception we will discuss is that of mishamshos b'moch, that is, placing a swab of some sort into oso malkom, into the woman's place of intercourse, and that would block the zera from reaching the womb and would therefore block pregnancy. Now, that's something which we ordinarily would not be allowed to do because it causes the husband's zera to be wasted and cannot enter the place of birth, and therefore normally it's usher. And for Baisa that says there's three situations which are potentially life-threatening for her to become pregnant, and therefore it's permitted. What are those three situations? So the Baisa says that is a kitana, a child. The Gemara explains later that it's a child between the age of 11 and 12. Less than age 11, she can't get pregnant. Older than age 12, it's no problem if she gets pregnant. It's between the ages of 11 and 12, and here we have our Bryce's expression, she may get pregnant and she may die. That's important. It implies that she may get pregnant, and even if she gets pregnant, it's only a possibility that she may die, but she may survive. But he'll still consider it a sakana, and therefore she's allowed to use contraception. Second case of a woman who's allowed to use contraception is a meuberes, a pregnant woman. Bryce explains, because if she gets pregnant again, it will harm her first fetus. And the third is a nursing woman. If she gets pregnant, it'll harm her live child because it'll make her lose her milk, and then he may starve. Okay. Now, the Gemara brought this opinion. The Gemara brought this as the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, the opinion of Rabbi Meir, that is. The Gemara says that the Chachamim disagree, and they say, no, none of these are allowed to use contraception. They should just be normal, and if they do something foolish, it's up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to save them. We say, Hashem will take care of those who do foolish things. If they want to be together with their husbands, then they may put themselves in a situation which is a sakana. Hashem will protect them. Okay, so now the Gemara says the reason we brought this down is because it's going to end up being a kasha in our Mishnah, and that is because we've shown here that is a possibility for a child, for a ketana, to give birth and to survive. That's because we said that a ketana who becomes pregnant between the ages of 11 and 12 she may become pregnant and she may die. That means she may survive. Therefore, it's possible for a ketana to have a child. If so, then it's possible to have a case of a woman falling to Yibum to her son-in-law. That is, she had a child, and that daughter became Mekudeshes to another man, and then she fell to Yibum to that man. And our Mishnah had said that it's not possible. Our Mishnah had said that the cases of the mother-in-law and the father-in-law's mother and an eyelidus, all those cases cannot possibly happen in a situation where they could be miyun. That is, we said in the Mishnah that you cannot have eyelidus or miyun apply to a mother-in-law, to a father-in-law's mother, or to a mother-in-law's mother. And the Mishnah said the reason is because all of those had a child, and therefore you cannot have miyun and you cannot have eyelidus. Now, eyelidus, I understand she can't be an eyelidus if she had a child, because an eyelidus by definition means she can't have a child. But what we assumed was that she can't have a child if she's a ketana, and therefore she can't do miyun because miyun can only be done as long as a woman's a ketana. Once she's an adult, she can't do miyun anymore, even if she was married off as a ketana. The problem here is, though, we've just shown you that there is a case in which a woman could have a child and be a ketana still. So therefore we should have the following case of a mother-in-law doing miyun. How so? So let's say Ruvain married a ketana. They had a child. She was 11 years old. They had a child. That child went and married Shimon. Then Ruvain died, and now his wife, who's the ketana, is falling to Yibum to her daughter's husband, who's Shimon. And therefore she's falling. That's Shimon having his mother-in-law fall to him to Yibum, and she could then go ahead and do miyun. So why does the Mishnah say that that's not a possible case? So the Gemara wants to say, okay, we'll have a few answers here. First of all, maybe we'll change the wording of our Mishnah, of our Brisa. It's not that it said that a ketana may become pregnant and may die. It's a ketana may become pregnant, and if she does, she will for sure die. And that's supported by a statement of Rabbi Bar Levi, who said that from age 11 and under, a girl cannot become pregnant. 11 to 12, she's going to die if she becomes pregnant, and so will the child. From 12 and older, then they're both perfectly capable of surviving. So therefore you would be able to change the wording, and therefore it's not possible for a ketana to have a child and survive. Okay, the Gemara says there's another way of explaining this. The Gemara has a kasha on this first. The kasha is that the wording of our Mishnah seemed to say that the reason you can't have a case of a mother-in-law doing miyun is because she has a child. It's not because she's a ketana. It's not because she can't be a ketana. According to what you're saying, you should say that it is impossible for her to be a ketana, since it's impossible for a mother-in-law to be a ketana. According to what you're saying, that's what it should say. She can't be a ketana. That's not what it says. It says because she can't have a child. That implies that had she been able to have a child, she would be able to be a ketana. If that's true, we should have a case where even if she's a ketana, she can't possibly do miyun because she has a child. That's what the Mishnah seems to imply. There is a case of a ketana who can't do miyun because she has a child. So therefore, the Gemara goes to its second explanation, which is that having a child means that she can't do miyun anymore. There's a few different ways of understanding that. The first explanation is that once she has a child, even if she's not old enough to be considered an adult, she becomes an adult automatically. Now, the halacha of adulthood doesn't necessarily go by her age. It goes by when she reaches a certain physical maturity. The Gemara means to say now that the status of having given birth counts as a sign of physical maturity, and she's an adult even if she has not reached the minimum requirement of years. Now the Gemara says, you can actually say better than that, having a child is better than all the physical signs. In what way is it better? So Gemara says, because there's a machlokes what the physical signs are. Is it 2 pubic hairs? Or Yehuda says it has to be that there is more hair there than hair covered skin in that area. And even if Yehuda would agree that she gives birth, then you don't have to worry about how much hair there is. She's considered to be an adult for sure. Now, the Gemara wants to say another approach to this, and that is that if she has given birth, it means that she must have hair. Sometimes we know she must have hair. Either she does or she doesn't. The Gemara says no. You can never really tell if she had hair because maybe she had hair and it fell out. So if she's given birth, even if she doesn't have any hair, the assumption would be that she had hair and it fell out because it proves that the hair must have existed if she gave birth. The Gemara says now that there's an approach that says you should never be concerned that she had hair that fell out. There's no such possibility. If there's hair, then it has to still be there. It says even according to that approach, if she's given birth, the pain of the birth may have caused the hair to fall out, and therefore even if she has no hair, the fact that she's given birth, we would assume that she did, even according to the opinion that such a thing never exists otherwise.